Great. So welcome all as we're all getting set up and ready for our first legislation 101 training. Just want to remind folks that while we're doing the presentation, please keep yourselves on mute. We love to see your friendly faces. We're not in a webinar, so we can see everybody's face if you want to take yourselves off camera. Also, it's past 5 p.m. and you all have been working really hard, so very much understandable keeping yourselves off camera today. As we get started with our presentation in just a minute, we do have a Q&A function enabled for this meeting. And so any questions that kind of pop up as we're going through our slides, feel free to go ahead and put them in the Q&A, and also use our chat room as just a space to discuss anything that's popping up for you as we're presenting. So looking at the time, it's 3 past the hour, and we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to our first ECE Voices Legislation 101 training. This is part 1 of a 2-part series, I believe, on legislation. And let's just go ahead and get started. I would like to mention very briefly that our trainings and the ECE Voices initiative is made possible by the Practitioners Voice of California Network, which is helping us fund everything that we do for 2 years. We're about halfway through our grant for the project, and so we're really excited to keep building and keep using all of our resources to do these trainings. So we'll go to the next slide. So before we get started, love to introduce ourselves. We have 3 presenters here today. Myself, I'm Juliet Terry. I am a government relations specialist with the Child Care Resource Center. I've been working with CCRC, as we also call it, for a little over a year now. I am from the Bay Area originally, and CCRC services Northern Los Angeles County and San Bernardino County. So I am super excited to be able to work with everybody here in the Sacramento region and get to know the needs and the community of practitioners here in Sacramento. And I can go ahead and pass this off to Heidi, the other advocacy co-lead for our region.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Heidi Kaiser. I'm the Public Policy Officer for Child Action. We are the local alternative payment program and resource and referral for Sacramento. And I've been in this field about 4 years now, I think. Yeah. And I will pass it over to Justina.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Justina Erpelding. I work for Every Child California, and I am the advocacy organizer. And I've been with Every Child California for just over 8 years now. And I will pass this back over to Juliet.
Okay, so we'll be hearing from all 3 of us tonight. I will just say before I launch into our agenda, we're going to be building a relationship together as a community of practitioners and folks who are working in advocacy. I myself have some years of experience as a childcare provider, both in centers and in the family childcare homes. I know Justina also has experience as well. So as much as we're here to help you all gain skills and knowledge around legislation, know that we are all of us are really also invested in what you're doing every day on the ground. And so we just have a deep appreciation for your time and your energy, and you bringing yourselves here after a long day of work to learn about how you can make a difference in others' lives and in your own community. So thank you for that. So what we're going to go over today is just an overview of the legislature, what a bill is, how the bill committees and different committee processes work within both houses of the California government, as well as what committee hearings are and what those look like. And we'll have, in our second part of our series on this training, we'll go deeper into committee hearings. We'll speak a little bit about amendments to bills and how those happen and what their timelines for those look like. We'll talk about the role of the governor. He's our executive. And then we'll go over some resources at the end for you all to access after the training and keep building knowledge and referring back to, as well as upcoming events with ECE Voices. Next slide. Amazing. So the legislature. I know that looking at our state capitol building right behind me, a lot of folks wonder what the heck goes on in here. Well, the legislature goes on in here. The legislature is a body of elected officials that write and pass laws. They are elected by you. They are your representatives. The folks that make up the legislature are the representatives in two houses. We have the Senate on one side and we have the Assembly on the other. So very much like our federal government, which is called a bicameral system, we have two houses that are supposed to act with checks and balances towards each other, their proposals and their activities. In the federal government, we have Congress members, but here we have Assembly members. Senators in California are called the upper house. There are 40 state senators, and they're supposed to represent their community, laws that represent the needs of the community. As far as the length that each senator can serve within their position, they can serve up to 12 years total, which is any combination of a 4-year Senate term or 2-year Assembly terms. You will hear sometimes when we talk about legislators, we also call them members because they're members of either the Senate or the Assembly. And we will often hear people say this member is terming out this year, which means that they've hit their limit. Their seat is going to become available for re-election. Over on the Assembly side, it's called the lower house. Historically, the Assembly, as well as like at the federal level, the Congress, is supposed to be more representative of communities, everyday people. And so there's a lot more Assembly members than there are senators. In California, we have 80 members that make up our Assembly, and they serve 2-year terms, and they can also, just like senators, be serving up to 12 years combined. They also work to pass laws and that help their communities, and they do so in conjunction with senators that also represent their districts. If you don't know who your senator or Assembly member for where you live is, they're easy to look up at findyourrep.legislature.ca.gov. So if you're curious about that, you can go ahead and look that up. So what is a bill? And before I jump into this, I'm just going to say, I know I'm going over a lot of information. Again, if there are questions that pop up, please go ahead and put them in our Q&A. Heidi and Justina, we all work to answer them as they come up. So what is a bill? Well, bills are documents that introduce new ideas for laws into the legislature every legislative session. These documents are used to discuss or possibly change existing laws, and the Assembly and the Senate open their bill ideas for public comment, and eventually, after they go through committee processes, if it makes it through the committee processes, bills can be stopped before they make it to the governor. But a successful bill will make it all the way through both sides of the houses to the governor's desk. Where do bills come from? They come from, a lot of the times, the community and the ideas of the community. It is very common, and this is something I learned in the last several years, just getting my feet wet, working within the legislature, is that senators and Assembly members, they usually don't have a large list of things that they're thinking of doing laws on. They're waiting for us, their community members, to come to them and tell them what is the most important pressing need for everybody right now. And that's where the role of advocacy comes in. So they get an idea, either they're really passionate personally about it, or advocates come forward and tell them about issues that they should care about for their community. And as the slide said, anybody can come in. This is open doors. This is your government. The Capitol is a public house. Members of the legislature will support a bill, and essentially they act as the spokesperson for this idea, for the law or changes to the law. The language of bills is legal language. Experts in the topic areas of every bill idea that forms come together and they draft a draft bill. Once that's complete, legislators will introduce this to their chamber, so either the Assembly or the Senate, and it then will become a bill that's stamped with a number. So bill numbers, I worked on a few bills in the last year, AB 596, SB 380. They get marked with these numbers to track them. There's a lot of bills and bill ideas that come up every year in the legislature. I think this last year was the most legislated year in California history, with about 1,500 bills that were new and needed to be numbered and worked through this process. So we need to keep track of them. Assembly bills will start with AB, and Senate bills will start with SB. So AB for Assembly bill, SB for Senate bill. I'll go to the next slide. So we're advocates. We have these ideas for a bill for a really pressing issue within our community. Maybe it's about childcare provider wages, which was something we talked about a lot in the last year in the legislature. Maybe it's about the requirements for 4-year-olds now that we have a new transitional kindergarten grade. Whatever it is, we have the bill. We found a champion within either the Assembly or the Senate to act as our bill sponsor. Well, what's next? Well, the bills have to be read in the Chamber of Origin, so either in the Assembly or the Senate, and nothing can happen to the bill after that for 30 days, because those 30 days allow for everybody within the legislature, as well as anybody interested from the public, to access these bills and learn about them. After the 30 days pass, the Rules Committee within each house receives the bill, and they're in charge of determining if the bill should be heard in the various committees that we'll be speaking about later. A bill will stay on its original side of the House, so either in the Assembly or in the Senate, until it's gone through the entire committee process within its House of Origin. After that, if the bill is successful making it through its House of Origin, the process switches to the other side of the House. So when the Assembly bills are successful in the Assembly, they pass out of the Assembly, they will go to the Senate and do the whole shebang over again. We can go to the next slide. So, reeling it back a little bit, the committee process. This is something that will happen, as I said, in the House of Origin and in the opposite house once it's been passed over. Committees are, they exist in both of the houses. They consist of senators and assembly members who have special or expert knowledge in or particular interests in certain issues. So if you're from a rural county and your senator knows a good deal about viticulture or growing and making wine, they'll probably sit on the special committee on viticulture. For us in the early childhood and education sector, our bills are generally heard in 2 committees. That's going to be Human Services and in Education, because our issues reside in both departments that we work with a lot, the Department of Social Services and the Department of Education. Bills that have any sort of money attached to them at all usually go through a fiscal impact analysis, and they'll also go through what's called the Appropriations Committee. Appropriations is a fancy word for moving money around in our budget and who moves the money around. Appropriations Committee is infamous as a place where bills go to die, because the other committees that we've spoken about, and you can see examples of other standing committees on the screen here, they're policy committees. So they talk about the substantive content of the bill. They talk about what's the need for the bill, who's being affected by the bill. They want to hear about stories from people from their communities during those times. But they're not going to think about how much it costs. That's all reserved for appropriations. There is a certain limit to the cost of a bill. I think if your bill is proposing anything over $100,000 worth of action, then it goes to appropriations. But if it's something that's under that, it could skip appropriations. And we can go to the next slide here. So I believe this is where my co-lead Heidi will give us a little bit more information about committee hearings and what that looks like.
Great, thank you, Juliet. Okay, so committee hearings. So the individuals that staff those committees are staffers with specialized knowledge of the subject matter usually. So they're the ones that are responsible for preparing materials in advance of those hearings. During those hearings, the committee members hear from the bill author, experts, citizens, and lobbyists or activists in the community. So these hearings are public. They're an opportunity for citizens to actually participate in the legislative process. The public can attend either in person or call in, which is actually a new change that's happened since the pandemic started, and it appears that they're going to continue allowing for that option because they realize that it enabled people who historically may have not had an opportunity to attend to actually participate in this process, so helping for good governance. So the author of the bill is either the assembly member or the senator. Their office gathers information they need to write the bill and background to help the legislator present it at hearings. They often reach out to special interest groups, to nonprofits who kind of provide those background materials for that. They'll often ask for experts in the field to testify in support of their bill. So this year, the bills that Juliet mentioned about the reimbursement rate, we actually had a Sacramento County family child care home provider who was able to testify on the bill, and it's a really great opportunity for the legislators to actually hear from someone who understands the field and is doing the work on the ground, and they seem to really love to be able to actually hear that information, and it's far more impactful than hearing from someone like myself. So the hearings, when they hear from experts, from the citizens, from advocates, they kind of really help committee members to determine if they'd like to offer any changes to the legislation, their decision making on whether to support it, whether to oppose the bill. So it's a really important part of the process. A single committee usually hears the bill multiple times, and there's often several amendments to the bill before it's even passed out of committee. The committee can choose to pass the bill as is without any amendments, amend it, or defeat the bill. To move legislation out of the committee, a majority of the committee members must vote to pass it. Otherwise, it will be held up in that committee. Once a bill passes out of committee, it is read for a second time by the House of Origin and placed on the daily file for third reading. Prior to the third reading, a bill analysis is prepared. During the third reading, the bill is explained by the author, debated by the members, and put to a roll call vote by the entire House. The chamber can either refuse passage, which means the legislation is stuck in that chamber, at least for now, or the legislation is passed and then it will move on to the other chamber. So i.e. from the Assembly to the Senate or vice versa. To move on to that other chamber, the bill must pass with a majority vote, which means 21 members in the Senate or 41 in the Assembly. Next slide. If an assembly bill is amended in the Senate or vice versa, it must actually go back to the House of Origin in order to pass the full, pass out of the legislature. The House of Origin must agree to those changes. If they can't, then a two-house conference committee is created, which is made up of 3 assembly members and 3 senators. And they kind of work to resolve the differences, and they create a report that then is voted on by both houses. Next slide. Once the legislation has passed both the houses, it's then sent to the governor. When he's deciding how to proceed with the bill, he has 3 options. He can either sign it into law, allow it to become law without signature, or veto it. If the governor vetoes the legislation, then he provides an explanation for why he vetoes it. Often it's language like, we don't feel like we have the money to pass this legislation right now. I believe this year, I think he had like a 15% veto rate on the bills, something around that.
Yeah.
The legislature can, in fact, override the governor's veto with a 2/3 majority vote in both houses. But as you can imagine, that's like a super political thing to do, especially when you have a super majority in the Assembly, Senate, and the executive branch. So it's not something that's been common in California. Next slide. If the governor then approves the bill, it's signed, and then it's sent over to the Secretary of State to receive the Great Seal of the state. In most cases, the bill then becomes law on January 1st of the new year. Next slide. And this is just kind of a handy life cycle of the legislation, kind of gives you an overview of what you've just learned. So it's a good resource to have in your back pocket. So I'll pass it back to you, Justina.
Okay, so that was a lot of information that we just gave to you guys. I wanted to show you this life cycle of a legislation before you actually, or after you learned it, because it can look pretty scary when you're looking at that, trying to understand what everything means. But everything that Juliet and Heidi just explained to you is this entire infographic. And we'll have this available afterwards so you can take a closer look at it on the resources page. Because this was a lot of information, before I get started with going over different resources for you, I'd like to take a moment for you to be able to unmute if you have any questions and just share with the group any questions you might have that you want answered live. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask us some questions.
I had a question about appropriations. If there's concern with the budget, how does that work in that part of this process?
I'm going to defer to Juliet.
Can you clarify what you mean by problem with the budget?
So at times you said appropriations is a place sometimes that bills go to die, which is true.
Yeah.
So what is the process that they go through looking at the finances, I guess, of the state to make some of those decisions?
Okay. So this is something that we'll be able to talk about in a little more depth in our next training. So among the committees that we talked about, the policy committees, like education, health and human services, agriculture, what have you, there's also subcommittees, and those subcommittees discuss the budget within the certain topic areas. So for instance, a lot of the ECE bills that we work on, they go through budget subcommittee to education. And so those committees are usually where the discussions over the financial concerns and the budget actions that the bill would require happen. So that happens before the appropriations committee. The policy committees, the ones that are just education, just human services, and the subcommittees, sub 1, sub 2, what have you, those are all happening at the same time. And the appropriations committee happens after all that. So usually there is clear information provided by the time a bill gets to appropriations on the exact financial impact of the bill. Problems with the budget is kind of what we're battling every year, whether or not our state has extra money, or we call it a surplus, or whether or not the state has already overpromised what we're going to spend from previous years, which we'll go ahead and call a deficit. California this year is seeing budget. We're not quite in a deficit yet. We started with like a baby deficit after several years of having lots of surplus money, and we've just been able to spend. So a lot of what policies do is also sort of negotiating what the budget at the end of the year is going to look like. And I believe, Justina, do we have a separate training on the budget?
Yes. So in November, we're going to be doing a budget 101 and a budget 101 part 2, so that we can do kind of an overview like we're doing now, and then a deeper dive into how it works.
So the budget is super important to the policy process, honestly, it's probably more important than the policy process. I will say, for example, this year with the wins that our sector has seen with Childcare Providers United, the union that represents family childcare providers, working to get reimbursement rate increases for those that take subsidized childcare. That happened through a budget process, even though we had two bills, which were SB 380, AB 596, that were policy bills. Those we used to support education and budget initiatives. And we ended up getting the money through the budget action and not even having to pass our policy bills. So just that's like a tidbit. We'll talk about all this more, and I hope that helped clarify your question.
I see a thumbs up. That's good. I will just give you a couple seconds in case anyone else has a question, and then I'll go ahead and jump into the next steps of this. Okay, not hearing anything. I just want to let you know that all of these slides and a recording of this presentation will be available, and we'll send you a link on how to access it with a follow-up email after the training, so that you have access to all of this. So I want to go over the next step. So now you have an idea of how the legislature works and how a piece of legislation works its way through the system and how it has to go on both sides. And the next step is having the information that you need to follow that bill, to figure out where it is and how to support it if you want to support it. And one of the best ways to do that is to bookmark this page, which is called the California Legislative Information page. Once a bill has been given a bill number, you can type that into this page and it will pull up the bill for you and give you a lot of information that you need. So this is what the first page looks like. And where it says under quick bill search is where you would put the bill number in there. And remember, it starts with an AB for an assembly bill, and it starts with an SB for a Senate bill. And then I have some screenshots here that is a little bit of a deeper dive of what you will find once you pull a bill up. You can see who the authors are of the bill, co-authors of the bill. So this happens to be one of the bills that Juliet was talking about with the rate reform bill, AB 596. So we know just from that it was an assembly bill. And it says Reyes, which Eloise Reyes was the lead author of that bill, who was helping push this through the process, and she is an assembly member. And then Limon had a mirror image bill going through SB 380 on her side so that we could kind of tackle it in both houses. Here you can see what the topic would be. It says early learning and care rate reform, so you have an idea. It'll tell you what sections it amends in, like education code or in social services and welfare institutions. So you have an idea of what changes it could make. And it tells you the house location. So this is located over in the Senate. It was. And so that's good to know, because you're going to take this information and take it over to the Senate website to follow it even closer. So you're really information gathering with this. I keep this bookmarked so that I can go and look up all the bills quickly and see where they're at and what's happening with it. You see the last amendment date. This is incredibly important, because if you're sending in support bills, they will not accept, if you're sending in support letters, they will not accept a support letter after an amendment. You have to resubmit a new one saying that you still agree with it, because maybe they made a substantial change to it and you no longer agree to it. So sometimes once you've submitted one, they will actually reach out to you and say, hey, if you want to continue supporting it, send another. But it's just good to keep an eye on it, and you'll kind of get used to when the hearing dates are, so you know when changes might be happening. You can see on here the committee motion was placed on suspense file. That can be a little confusing, because it seems like maybe it's not going to go any further, and maybe it won't. But sometimes bills are just put on suspense for many, many different reasons. And maybe some of it is they're just tweaking it a bit and they're going to bring it back. A lot of times when bills are heard in the hearings, the members of the committee will say, you know, we really want to support this, but we need these changes made to it. The assembly member or the senator that is supporting that bill will go back to maybe even the organizations like, for example, Every Child California and the ECE Coalition will have a discussion with the assembly member staff and decide how we want to move forward with it. And then it can be taken off suspense. You can see the committee vote results here too. So you can see how many yeses it got to pass to the next committee. Down here under actions, this tells you from the very beginning, starting at the bottom, that it went to rules committee, like we talked about. It was read to the floor. They couldn't do anything for 30 days. It got sent over to rules committee. Rules said, you know what, this rate reform bill needs to be heard in Human Services Committee and then the Education Committee. And like Juliet said, and like Heidi said, that is normally where our bills land. So when it went there, you can see that the first thing they did is they passed it. 5 voted yes, and they moved it to the Committee on Education. Once it got there, they said, yep, we want to pass it here as well. So we're, all cheering in the background because it's making it through the system. And then you see that it got moved to appropriations, which is where we talked about there was a price tag, because this had to do with increasing rates for providers, which got addressed in the budget. So when it went to appropriations, they said, we're just going to slip that in the suspense file until we figure out if this is going to be in the budget or not. But the reason that we kept these bills going was because if we didn't get exactly what we wanted in the budget, we had some sort of vehicle to come back and start working on this again. You can see it's held under submission. That just means nothing's happening with it. It's just sitting there. And often this does become a dead bill. And then go on to
Christina, if I could
yes.
just add
Yes,
one
please.
thing about appropriations and suspense and all that. So
Yes.
something that you all might encounter when tracking your bills or working on a bill, or just, watching all this go down, is that if a bill makes it to appropriations and it's just clearly not going to make it out, it's too expensive, the chair really doesn't like the bill, there's not enough momentum politically, sometimes authors, the legislators, the main sponsors of the bill, will do something called a gut and amend. So the bill number will stay the same. It will still be SB 380, but it goes through a gut and amend process where they just can change the whole thing completely to something new. And may even render down like a large bill that was supposed to provide, huge pay increases for a certain population. Well, now that bill's just making a small technical change in the definition of something, and that has no cost to it. Legislators like to do this because while they do love helping the community, they also love signing bills. So whatever they can get across the finish line to sign is really good for them. So that's something that you might also see in this part of the process.
Yes, and we do see a lot of the gut and amends, and in the next session, we'll also go over legislative sessions, because there's 2-year sessions and we're in the middle of a 2-year session. So that affects the bills as well. So we'll go over that more in depth with our next training that's coming up on November 7th. So after you gather your information here of knowing where your bill is landed, you'll want to then go over to use the California State Assembly or the California State Senate site. These websites are also good to bookmark, because if you want to track when a hearing is, if you want to know how to send in your support letter for a bill, these are the pages you need to go to. So if you see your bill is in Senate, then you would go over to the Senate page. You would need to know what committee it's in. So if it's in Human Services, you would go to the committee. You would go to the committee page, find Human Services, and click on it. When you open that up, it's going to show you everything you need to know: the date it's being heard, the time it's being heard, the location, and usually a day not too much before, a day before a hearing, they'll finally list the agenda, and the agenda will tell you in the order in which the bills will be heard. Because you could end up at a hearing that, they're hearing 50 bills and it's the last one. So you'll kind of be able to gauge your day on that, on whether you want to call in or you want to go in person to testify and say you agree with the bill and you want them to support it. And then these are the websites that you would bookmark. These are their main pages. So when you go out there, you'll see the daily file and everything on there.
Yeah.
Just a reminder to mute yourself while we're presenting. And then once you get in there and you find all of this information, what's really nice about their website now is that they accept letters for support through the portal, and you can access it from their committee pages. This is fairly new. They've been doing it for a few years now. You used to be able to email a support letter directly over to them, but now they want you to do it through the portal system. And I can tell you from experience, it's easy that way, because when you type in the bill number into the portal, it tells you exactly what committee is being heard and where it's going to. And it keeps track of all the letters that you've sent in. So if you're wondering if you've done it already, or if you've sent one since it's been amended, you'll have a history to go check on. This is what it looks like when you click on either the Senate. So the top one is what the Senate looks like. And you can see here, it says watch today. So you can always, I know at the office at Every Child California, we're often having hearings running in the background on our computers with our earbuds in, and we're ready to call in, or we have a couple staff members over there. If you click on these, you can get the agendas, the full agendas. If you go to their regular website, you will be able to get a quick agenda as well. The longer agenda is the one that they don't release until about a day before. You do want to double check their phone numbers. I always look at this main page and then go to their PDF agenda and compare those and just make sure. When you call in, I know that can be intimidating the first time because you don't know if people can hear you or not. I can promise you that they can't hear you. They do put you on mute, and then when your bill comes up, somebody will come on and they will tell you to push a button so they know that you're interested in that bill. And then someone comes on and tells you what number you are. So they assign you like your number 32. When they say your number, you unmute yourself, you say you support the bill, and then you're done. That's all it takes. It can be a long process. So if you're working at your desk, you can just, have it playing and have yourself on mute in the background. But you can see down here, the California Assembly website, what it looks like to see the agenda, and you would click on that and open it. So these are really great things to bookmark so that, you have the information that you need to be able to participate and advocate for the issues that you really care about. And if you're part of ECE Voices, we'll be providing you with legislative updates. And if you're a member of Every Child California, we give you legislative updates so that you know what bills are out there that affect the ECE community and when hearings are coming up. We also prepare support letters for you, but this gives you the information that you need so that you also, if there's other bills outside of what we're supporting, you can do it yourself. And then in our next training, we're going to go and deep dive into the support letter portal and how to write a support letter and how to set up an account with the portal. At this point, I want to stop for a second and ask you guys, we do have a little bit more after this slide, but ask if you guys have any questions that we can address while you have us all together. Feel free. It's your chance. You can always email later as well too if you think of something later that you want clarification on. Okay, then I'm gonna show you this. This is the training that's coming up November 7th. It's going to be the second part of Legislation 101. Like I said, we're going to learn about the California Position Letter Portal because position letters have to go through here to be counted. We're gonna learn about how to set up an account, how to write a position letter, and how to submit it. We'll go over what's expected when you attend a hearing to show support. There's a difference between going in and saying I support a bill and testifying, and what is that difference? The bill analysis and why it's important to read through that. And then also on the bill analysis is where you can see if you've been recorded as someone who is supporting the bill or not. And then how the legislation sessions work. We talked about how there's the 1 and 2 year bills and why it's important to know when your legislator is on break. I also want to let you know that after this training, I'm going to upload the video to this page and you'll get a link to it. So you'll get access to the glossary of legislative terms, that picture that we looked at, the life cycle of a bill, an overview of the legislative process in the DOF, which is the Department of Finance legislative process. There'll be a button there for the recording and the slides for you to access, and then you'll have a chance to get the certificate of attendance. There'll be a small survey for you to fill out just saying, you know, did you enjoy this training, and is there anything that you would like to see changed with the training? If you're not a member with ECE Voices, it is free. I do encourage you to sign up to become a member, to go to your regional meetings and be invited to the Capitol. We cover all travel expenses for doing that. We want to bring you in front of the legislators and to the Capitol for the hearing so that you can share your stories with them and really make a difference for the ECE community and your programs. You can find a sign up here where it says join today out on the ECE Voices website. We do have an event coming up, a Region 5 meet and greet. We're going to have the field representative for Robert Rivas's office there, and also a representative for Alex Lee, who is the assembly member in District 24. It's from 9 to 11 a.m. It is in person. There's coffee and bagels. We just want to kind of jumpstart that relationship building that we were talking about that comes in handy when you're ready to advocate. So at this point, I'm gonna let you ask questions if you do have any. Otherwise, Juliet or Heidi, do you have anything that you would like to add here at the end?
No, just thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm kind of shocked that you guys don't have more questions because this is like really dense, kind of difficult information to grapple with. So I'm like super impressed. I hope it's making sense. Please do not hesitate to reach out to myself or Heidi if you do have any questions. I'm excited to go deeper into these processes with you guys next time. Just want to echo that your voices really, really, really make a difference. The wins that we've seen in our budget in the last year would not have happened without really strong community voice. We've had a lot of really strong voices from CCPU members, which is fabulous, but we're also really excited about building the voice of folks that are not family child care providers that work, you know, in any realm of ECE and in these programs. And so just thank you and really look forward to working with you guys more.
Yeah, thank you for being with us tonight. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Hopefully see you at the next